faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. Up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman! Yes, it's Superman!
He was the world's Superman until he was found dead, naked, and shot in the head. They called it self-harm. But hidden confessions, forensic flaws, and Hollywood's darkest secrets now point to something sinister. Stay with us, because what really happened to George Reeves changes everything. Let's get into it. How Hollywood built and broke George Reeves. George Reeves was born George Kiefer Brewer in 1914 in Woolstock, Iowa. After his parents split, he moved with his mother to Pasadena, California. In school, he stood out, not just for his size, but for his talents. He was a skilled amateur boxer, played several instruments, and had a natural stage presence. That last gift landed him at the Pasadena Playhouse, where he was spotted by a Hollywood casting director. In the late 1930s, Reeves signed with Warner Brothers and got his first big break with a small part in Gone with the Wind. He was tall, handsome, and had the look studios loved at the time. His career seemed ready to launch, but then World War II changed everything. Reeves joined the Army Air Corps and spent the next few years away from Hollywood. By the time he came back, Hollywood had moved on to newer faces. Post-war, Reeves struggled to find leading roles. His name no longer carried buzz, and he bounced between forgettable parts and stage work. That changed in 1952 when he was cast as Superman in the new TV series Adventures of Superman. The role gave him instant fame across America. Kids saw him as the real Man of Steel, and to the public, George Reeves was Superman, not an actor playing a role. But the same role that made him a household name also locked him in a box. Producers didn't want Superman in other movies. Reeves found himself typecast, and it hit his career hard. Studios feared audiences wouldn't take him seriously in any other role. Even Alfred Hitchcock reportedly dropped him from consideration for Psycho, afraid viewers would see Superman, not the character. Reeves wasn't just stuck professionally, he was trapped financially too. Unlike today's superhero stars, Reeves made very little money from his iconic role. The show had tight budgets, and there were no major endorsement deals. To make ends meet, he began appearing in costume at grocery stores, schools, and public events. These appearances paid little, but they kept him in the spotlight. One incident from this time shows how blurred the lines between fantasy and reality had become. At a live event, a young boy reportedly brought a loaded gun, hoping to test if Superman was truly bulletproof. Reeves calmly talked the boy down, saying the bullets would bounce and hurt others. Whether the story is fully true or not, it reveals how deep the public's belief in Superman had gone, and how dangerous it had become for the man behind the suit. Behind the scenes, George was falling apart. He started drinking more often, trying to manage the growing stress and disappointment. He smiled for the cameras, but his private life told another story. Friends noticed a change. He seemed distant, angry, and tired. The fame that once felt like a dream was now a heavy chain around his neck. The entertainment industry turned its back on him. Casting directors wouldn't see him. He wasn't getting movie offers. Even commercials passed him over. He had become a one-role actor in a town that valued versatility. Still, Reeves kept trying. He started to explore directing and wanted to step behind the camera. He believed he had more to offer than just the Superman suit. But the offers were slow to come, and the doors mostly stayed shut. Every step forward felt like pushing uphill with no end in sight. What made it worse was the public's obsession with the Superman image. At restaurants, airports, or stores, people expected Superman, not George. He had to stay polite, stay smiling, stay on all the time. But when he was alone, The pressure crushed him. He was famous everywhere, but respected nowhere. He wasn't just lonely, he was isolated. Hollywood didn't support actors who got stuck. There were no mental health conversations or comeback plans. You were either in or out, and Reeves was slowly being pushed out. And everyone, including George, knew it. By the late 1950s, George had become a symbol of both success and failure. He was adored by millions, but lived in quiet despair. His fame had become a burden. Superman made him a star, but it also erased who he really was. And that identity crisis would soon lead to something much darker. As his professional options ran dry and personal demons crept closer, George's life began to unravel. But no one knew just how bad things had gotten. Not yet. 5 people were inside George Reeves's home that night, but somehow no one saw who fired the gun. A night that changed everything. June 15, 1959, began like any other night for George Reeves. He and his fiancée, Leonore Lemon, had dinner earlier in the evening. Back at home in Benedict Canyon, they were joined by Reeves's houseguest, writer Robert Condon. The night seemed quiet at first, but by midnight, everything shifted. The porch light was switched on, a silent signal among certain Hollywood circles. In Beverly Hills, this meant guests were welcome. Within minutes, William Bliss and Carol Van Ronkel arrived uninvited. These kinds of pop-ins weren't unusual in elite social scenes. Reeves, however, wasn't pleased to see them. The vibe inside the house quickly turned uncomfortable. Reeves was annoyed by the intrusion and reportedly made it clear. He had been dealing with personal stress, and the last thing he wanted was a party. At some point, tensions rose between him and Bliss. Witnesses later said George threatened to throw him out. Upstairs, emotions ran high. Leonore Lemon, known for her blunt humor, allegedly made a chilling remark. She joked that George would go upstairs and shit himself. Minutes later, a sound echoed through the house. First the opening of a drawer, then a single loud gunshot. Everything went silent. George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom. He was naked, lying on the bed, with a bullet wound to his head. A Luger pistol was on the floor, and a bullet was lodged in the ceiling. The angle of the shot and the positioning of the gun raised immediate questions. Yet, downstairs, the guests continued drinking as if nothing serious had happened. When police arrived, they were met with an eerie calm. No one seemed distraught or panicked. The scene was oddly casual for a house where someone had just died. The guests gave vague details. There was no self-harm note, no sign of a struggle, and no urgency from those inside. For investigators, the details didn't add up. If Reeves had shot himself, why was the bullet in the ceiling and not somewhere else? Why was the shell casing found in an unusual spot? And most of all, why did none of the people in the house hear signs of distress before the shot? These were red flags that didn't fit the neat label of self-harm. Lemon's strange behavior made things worse. Her offhand comment about George shitting himself seemed too specific. Police questioned whether she knew something or was trying to cover up. Some even wondered if she or one of the guests had been involved directly. Yet, no arrests were made, and the death was ruled a self-harm within 2 days. There's another piece to consider: Hollywood's strange, open house culture at the time. Many stars lived lives with little privacy. It wasn't uncommon for homes to turn into late-night gathering spots. Reeves may have been dealing with the mental strain of constant interruptions and a lack of control over his personal space. That environment could have pushed him deeper into frustration. What happened in that house may not have been pre-planned, but it was fueled by chaos. Too many people, too much alcohol, too many blurred boundaries. The house was no longer a safe space. It was a place where anything could happen, and did. The press jumped on the story, calling it a sad end to a fading star. But behind the headlines, questions grew. Why were the guests so detached? Why did the timeline feel too clean? And why did the official story ignore the inconsistencies? Years later, new investigators and authors revisited the case. They found evidence of sloppy police work and rushed decisions. One detail often missed: multiple bruises on Reeves's body that weren't explained. Others noted how quickly the house was cleaned and how evidence was left unsecured. These aren't signs of a thorough investigation, they're signs of something being swept aside. George Reeves's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a mystery wrapped in strange behavior, unanswered questions, and a culture that prized silence over truth. What really happened in that house remains unclear, but one thing is certain: the official story was too simple for such a messy night. The official story. The Los Angeles Police Department ruled George Reeves's death a self-harm almost immediately. They said he was depressed, frustrated with his stalled career, and had no future in Hollywood. The coroner's report claimed the wound's angle matched a self-inflicted shot. They also pointed to the bullet casing found under his body as support. To officials, it looked like an open and shut case until the details were examined closely. From the start, something didn't sit right. Reeves was found completely naked, which was unusual even for a self-harm. Most people don't choose to die that way, especially not public figures. The positioning of the body also raised questions. For the bullet to end up lodged in the ceiling, Reeves would have had to be lying down in a strange position, bent, with the gun pointed at his own temple in an unnatural way. More red flags followed. The gun had recently been cleaned and oiled, which removed all fingerprints. That made it impossible to prove if Reeves even handled it that night. On top of that, police found 2 additional bullet holes in the bedroom floor. They didn't match the fatal shot, and were never explained in the official story. No effort was made to connect them to anything. One of the most serious issues involved the handling of Reeves's body. Before a full autopsy could be done, his body may have been washed and partially embalmed. That erased important forensic evidence. The coroner couldn't test for powder burns, which could have proven if the shot came from Reeves's hand or someone else's. Whether that was carelessness or something more deliberate, it damaged the case permanently. These gaps in the investigation didn't go unnoticed by those close to Reeves. His mother, Helen Basolo, immediately rejected the self-harm claim. She believed her son had been killed. Helen hired private investigators, hoping they would find answers that the police ignored. But every time they asked the hard questions, doors closed on them. Helen's team ran into major resistance. Records were missing. Witnesses changed their stories. Leads were dropped without reason. It felt like a wall had gone up around the case. Something, or someone, didn't want the truth to come out. The media reported on the strange parts of the case, but the focus stayed on Reeves's depression. It was an easy explanation that the public could understand. A fading actor, typecast as Superman, alone and hopeless, it made for a clean narrative. But that story ignored the mess underneath. Another piece of the puzzle is the state of the LAPD in the 1950s. At the time, the department had deep ties to powerful Hollywood studios. Police officers were known to protect high-level interests. When scandal threatened big names, reports were buried and facts were twisted. It wasn't about justice. It was about image control. Reeves's death may have been more than a simple tragedy. It may have been cleaned up before the truth could get out. If someone important was involved, whether it was a studio executive, a mob-connected associate, or even someone close to Reeves, then there was a motive to steer the case away from killing. The rushed ruling and lack of proper evidence handling begin to make more sense in that context. This theory also fits with what many in Hollywood whispered behind closed doors. Some believed the police didn't botch the case. They erased it. By the time investigators or reporters tried to dig deeper, the trail had already gone cold. Witnesses became unreliable. Physical evidence was either gone or contaminated. What could have been a solvable case became a dead end. The gun itself, a German Luger, wasn't even fully examined. There was no gunpowder residue test, no fingerprints, no ballistic comparison with the 2 extra holes in the floor. These are basic steps in a proper death investigation, and yet they were skipped. The more you look at the official story, the more it crumbles. Nothing about that night adds up without serious mental gymnastics. And when police and the coroner seem more focused on closing the case than finding the truth, it's no longer just about bad procedures. It's about a possible cover-up. George Reeves didn't just die under strange circumstances. His death was handled with a level of carelessness or control that demands deeper questions. Maybe it wasn't just a lazy conclusion. Maybe someone didn't want this case solved at all. And maybe that someone had the power to make sure it never would be. His ex bought him everything. His fiancée left in days. Behind the romance was something cold, calculated, and possibly deadly: the women in his life. George Reeves's final relationship was with Leonore Lemon, a nightclub socialite with a reputation for wild behavior. She was younger, fiery, and often volatile, bold. Many close to Reeves believed their relationship was toxic. There were frequent public fights, including rumors of smashed furniture and screaming matches behind closed doors. It was clear the romance was intense, but far from stable. Leonore wasn't just angry. She was jealous and possessive. Several witnesses claimed Reeves had grown tired of her and was considering breaking things off. Lemon reportedly didn't take rejection lightly. Some friends described her behavior as controlling, even dangerous. After his death, she quickly fled to New York, leaving more questions than answers. Leonore gave conflicting accounts about the night Reeves died. She joked about him shitting himself just before the fatal shot, a remark that seems eerily predictive or even staged. When questioned about the 2 extra bullet holes, she called it an accident and laughed it off. That kind of flippant response raised eyebrows, especially considering someone had just died. The LAPD never pressed her further, and she avoided serious questioning. The party guests that night only made the scene more confusing. William Bliss was a minor acquaintance, not a close friend, yet he was there and somehow became the first to find the body. Carol Van Ronkel was another guest, rumored to be romantically linked to Robert Condon, a house guest who had been living with Reeves. Their presence didn't make sense for a man said to be reclusive and depressed. If Reeves was feeling suicidal, why was there a social gathering at all? Condon's behavior was also strange. He reportedly stayed downstairs drinking while police worked the crime scene upstairs. It didn't match the urgency or concern of someone who had just lost a friend. The entire group acted like they were watching a scene unfold, not reacting to a tragedy. Some investigators privately noted how little grief was shown by anyone in the house. But perhaps the most significant woman in Reeves's life was Toni Mannix. She was the wife of MGM executive Eddie Mannix, a powerful studio enforcer with rumored mob connections. Toni was older than George, but deeply devoted. She bought him a house, a car, and kept him in luxury during their relationship. Friends said she treated George like a possession, not a partner. When Reeves left Toni for Leonore, the fallout was emotional and possibly dangerous. Toni was devastated and embarrassed. Some say she was humiliated in front of Hollywood circles, especially since her marriage to Eddie Mannix was more of an open secret than a closed affair. The split didn't just end their romance. It disrupted the powerful protection Reeves had enjoyed through Tony. That protection may have turned into a threat. There are reports that Tony took petty revenge, including stealing George's dog. But more disturbing was what she allegedly told Noel Neill, the actress who played Lois Lane, just hours after the death. According to Neill, Tony called and said, "They killed George." It wasn't framed as a question or suspicion, it was a statement of fact. Later in life, rumors swirled of a deathbed confession from Tony Mannix. The story goes that she told a priest that George had been killed and that she knew who did it. Many have brushed this off as emotional guilt or confusion. But viewed another way, it may have been a calculated move, a way to unburden herself before dying, but also to protect herself from taking secrets to the grave. If Tony really knew something, it adds a dangerous new layer to the story. It also brings Eddie Mannix back into focus. He was known for fixing problems for MGM's stars, scandals, cover-ups, and even threats. If Tony asked him for help, or if Eddie saw Reeves as a threat to her mental state, it's not hard to imagine extreme steps being taken. Reeves was no longer useful to the Mannixes and possibly no longer safe. No one involved in Reeves's life at the time behaved normally in the aftermath. From the fiancé's fast exit to the emotionless guests to the ex-lover's strange phone call, the details refused to sit still. Everyone had something to hide, or at the very least, something they didn't want to talk about. George Reeves wasn't just surrounded by chaos. He was surrounded by people with motive, opportunity, and secrets. That's not a self-harm scene. That's a storm waiting to be uncovered. The studio monster behind the curtain. Eddie Mannix wasn't just a name in the credits. He was MGM's top fixer, the man stars called when they were in trouble and wanted the problem to disappear. Known for his ruthless tactics, Mannix had strong connections with organized crime figures like Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen. His job was to protect the studio's image at any cost, and that included bribes, threats, and cover-ups. Some believed he even arranged fatal accidents when a scandal threatened to go public. Over the years, Mannix was linked to suspicious events, from forced abortions to unexplained deaths. These weren't rumors whispered by outsiders, but claims made by people within the industry. Mannix operated with quiet power, and his ties to the mob gave him the means to make anything look like an accident. His influence reached into police stations, hospitals, and even funeral homes. If a secret needed to be buried, Mannix had someone to dig the hole. His marriage to Tony Mannix was unusual by 1950s standards. The two had what many described as an open marriage, and Tony's long affair with George Reeves seemed to have Eddie's full support. He even joined them on vacation, giving the impression of a tolerant, friendly third wheel. But beneath the surface, Eddie's tolerance may have been more strategic than sincere. When Reeves broke things off with Tony and moved on to Leonore Lemon, that arrangement suddenly became unstable. What followed was a string of strange events that didn't feel random. Weeks before Reeves's death, he was involved in a suspicious car crash. The vehicle's brake fluid had been drained, making the crash seem more like sabotage than an accident. Reeves was hospitalized with injuries. No one was ever held responsible, and the timing, just before his death, was too close for comfort. Some researchers believe the crash was a warning, a signal to stop talking, stop moving forward, and stop making trouble. But Reeves didn't slow down. He was trying to rebuild his career, cut ties with Tony, and move into a new phase of his life. That push for independence may have been seen as a threat by people who didn't want him free. Then, there's the theory surrounding the gun used in Reeves's death. Official reports said it was his own weapon, but details don't add up. The gun was freshly oiled, which wiped away any fingerprints. That's odd behavior for someone about to commit self-harm. There were also no clear signs that anyone had broken into the house. But what if the killer didn't have to break in? This is where things get darker. Some now believe William Bliss, the party guest who found the body, may have been more than just a witness. He could have been a distraction, someone invited to draw attention away from other movements in the house. While guests chatted downstairs, a second man may have slipped into Reeves's room, fired the fatal shot with a silenced weapon, and staged the scene. It would explain the calm behavior of the guests and the lack of any alarm. No one saw another person enter or leave, but the house was large and busy that night. Doors were unlocked, lights were on, and Reeves was already irritated by the surprise gathering. All it would have taken was a few minutes of confusion, just enough time to carry out a quiet, targeted hit. If someone like Eddie Mannix wanted the job done right, he had the means and the network to make it look like a clean self-harm. What's more troubling is how quickly the investigation was closed. The police accepted the self-harm theory without fully questioning everyone or following up on clear red flags. That kind of quick resolution hints at influence from someone powerful. LAPD in the 1950s had a reputation for corruption and strong ties to Hollywood studios. If Mannix made a few calls, the case could have been wrapped before the press had time to dig deeper. The more you look, the more it seems George Reeves wasn't just a man who fell into despair. He was tangled in a web of loyalty, betrayal, and quiet threats. Eddie Mannix stood at the center of that web, calm, connected, and possibly lethal. The evidence may never be enough to convict, but it's more than enough to doubt the official story. This wasn't just a Hollywood tragedy, it may have been a silent execution. George Reeves died alone, but not unnoticed. Now, the clues point to something bigger, and the truth is finally surfacing. What really happened to Superman? The mystery of George Reeves's death still sits at a crossroads of three grim possibilities. The first is self-harm, where he was overcome with depression, rejection, and a stalled career and finally gave up. The second is an accident, where a heated fight or careless handling of a gun turned fatal in a flash. The third and most disturbing is killing, that someone powerful decided Reeves had become a problem and quietly removed him. Each version has its believers, but none can erase the strange details that don't quite add up. If it was self-harm, the lack of a note, the odd position of the body, and missing fingerprints still demand answers. If it was an accident, it doesn't explain the oiled weapon, the silence from the guests, or the way the scene was staged. And if it was killing, the rushed investigation and lack of follow-up suddenly make more sense. What's left is a fog of suspicion, surrounded by poor police work, missing evidence, and silence from the people who should have spoken up. That silence became the real cover-up. From the beginning, the LAPD treated the case casually. The coroner called it self-harm, and the police accepted that without serious digging. But behind the scenes, there was pressure from people tied to MGM, a studio that had everything to lose if one of its most famous on-screen faces became part of a scandal. Investigators didn't question everyone thoroughly. Important forensic tests were skipped, and key facts were ignored. There's also the media's role in shaping public memory. Hollywood in the 1950s had strong control over the press. Stories were fed to journalists who wanted to stay in the studio's good graces. That's how a narrative of depressed Superman shits himself was formed. Simple, clean, and easy to forget. It worked. The public moved on, and the truth was left buried with Reeves. Then there's Toni Mannix. Her emotional breakdowns, odd behavior, and strange timing all raised suspicions. She confessed something on her deathbed, reportedly to a priest, but that testimony never became official. It was brushed aside as grief or delusion. Eddie Mannix, the man who may have pulled strings behind the scenes, was never even questioned seriously. His power kept him untouched, and his silence said everything. Most of the key people in the case are now gone. Reeves, Lemon, the party guests, and the Mannixes are all dead. The chance to get a first-hand account is lost forever. But what remains is a trail of clues that tell a bigger story. The story of how the entertainment world once ran on fear, image, and silence, and how even someone playing a superhero could be crushed by the machine behind the screen. George Reeves's death teaches more than just how a man died. It reveals what fame can't fix. He had recognition, a loyal fan base, and the face of a national icon. But behind the mask, he was isolated, typecast, and emotionally stuck. His struggles were invisible to the outside world, hidden behind a smile and a cape. Hollywood during the Golden Age wasn't all glitz and glamour. It was a place where secrets were buried quickly and careers ended without warning. Stars were products, and their lives were tightly managed. If someone became inconvenient or dangerous to the brand, they could be removed, one way or another. Reeves may have been one of those casualties. The truth about George Reeves may never be officially solved. But that doesn't mean the truth is lost. Each clue, each inconsistency, points to something more than the official story. Whether it was a silenced argument, a well-planned hit, or a deep depression nobody truly saw, his death shattered the illusion of Hollywood's invincibility. Superman didn't die fighting a villain on screen. He died alone, in the dark, surrounded by people who should have helped, but didn't. Reeves's story still matters because it speaks to something bigger than one man's fate. It shows how power, image, and silence can distort justice. It reminds us that behind every smiling celebrity, there might be a human being struggling in ways we don't see. And it warns us that when the truth threatens the wrong people, it can vanish fast. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.